Hey, good afternoon. This is Michael Gilfix. We're so glad you're joining us. This is our webinar, as you know, on healthcare decision-making in a crisis. It's one of our very, very special webinars that we're presenting exclusively to members of the Peace of Mind program. We have a wonderfully large group attending. We're very, very pleased that so many of you are taking the time to join us. Kind of hope some of your family members have joined you as well, by the way. This is about taking care of families, as you know. That's what we're all about. Just the littlest bit of housekeeping before we get started. We will, you will have an opportunity, I believe, by going to the Q&A bar. If you want to type in any questions, we'll try to leave some time at the end. We're not going to have interrupted questions. We want to get through the topic in a pretty organized way. You know, we're going to be, you know us, kind of casual, yet formal, and make sure the flow goes and we cover all of the points that we think are most important. So I'm going to be doing this along with Myra Gerson Gilfix, also an attorney in our office. So let me do just a moment of introduction of her. Myra has been, there we go, there she is. So Myra's an attorney in our firm, founding member as well. Among the many, many attributes, Phi Beta Kappa at Stanford. She won some writing awards in the law school, an awesome writer. Founder of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. She's been involved in so many areas of law and medicine over the years. It's been tremendous. And one of the third bullets there, she's done a lot of writing. And one of the most important articles she ever wrote, it's a while ago, was in the American Journal of Law and Medicine, which is really one of the premier publications in that field. She's a co-author of a brief that was in the United States Supreme Court on the issue of healthcare decision-making. And I think the most important point for today is that Myra has always been ahead of the curve, time after time after time. Some of you know that, I don't know, a year, 2 years ago, we circulated, she wrote it, a write-up about hand washing. And because it is a big deal, and she had to convince me and others that it was such a big deal, which she did. And it was like about a month after that the Wall Street Journal had a front page article talking about the importance of hand washing. She's been thinking and researching about ventilators. We're going to talk about that later on. Writing and thinking about patient advocacy, patient rights for years. And the media sooner or later catches up to her. So she helps us stay ahead of the curve. So again, Myra and I will be presenting as we move along. And just before we get into the topics, I want to just make the point that, as we know, we are living in crazy, unprecedented times. Okay? Nothing is normal. And the next slide will reveal this. Thank you. I don't control the slides, folks, just so you know. So we'll be a little, we'll be giving some messages. But, you know, again, it's obvious. And not a good thing about what's going on. But one result of what's going on is I think it is making us think about decisions and healthcare. And what happens if, you know, if things just go to hell? I mean, who's going to be able to step up? What resources are we going to have? Will our decisions be respected? Just how is it all going to work? So a lot of that is thrown up into the air. I mean, let's face it. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is about what's going on today, the pressures of COVID-19 and the way society and the healthcare system are reacting. Also, just so we don't miss the opportunity, a lot of today is going to talk about healthcare decision-making, not in crisis times, but you know, what's going on generally that we all need to be thinking about. So again, here's kind of an overview of the day, or the general topics of healthcare decision-making. As said, we're gonna take some time and talk about the virus and some of the issues and challenges that it presents. But let's not lose sight of the fact that all of the issues we're going to talk about today, they're with us every day. It's just that they don't come up in a pandemic mode. If you have a severe illness, a stroke, any kind of a catastrophic medical event that puts you into stress and into the hospital, all of these issues come up, the issues we're going to explore today. And by the way, you're in our Peace of Mind program. We have done your Advance Directives. You are in the small minority of folks who have thought about this issue. You've done your documents. So you're leagues ahead of the vast majority. And yet, you know, there's still things we don't have time to think about. So again, it comes up when there's an accident. And in all of those circumstances, and all of them, the challenges and the difficulty of life-sustaining treatment decisions. Who's empowered? All of these topics that we're going to be that we're going to be exploring today. So let's go forward to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is about the directive. And Myra, why don't you, let's go through, now again, most folks listening know this, but we all need a refresher. So the basics of the directive, the Advance Directive, please.
Yeah, so the fact that you've all done this is you've taken a huge step toward at least taking some control in these crazy times. So, but choosing an agent, and we're going to talk a lot more about that, but basically that is probably the single most decision that you've made, and you may need to reevaluate it. And it gives you an opportunity to express your wishes, i.e. the what if questions. What if I'm in this particular state? In accordance with your values and your hopes for your quality of life. It also gives you an opportunity to make those decisions explicit where you can. I mean, there are a few things that you might know for sure you don't ever want to have, or things that you know you always want to have. Next slide.
Yeah, Myra, why don't you proceed, to talk about the kinds of things you can address in your Advance Directive. And again, many folks watching have already done this.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's go to the next slide.
That's right. This is a good time to actually look at your Advance Directive to see who you've decided you want to be for your agent, and to reevaluate or evaluate maybe for the first time. Maybe the person you appointed doesn't even know you've appointed that person. They need to know, of course. But you want to make sure that they're willing to serve, that they understand the responsibility. They need to be willing to talk to you now, probably, because there are some issues that the COVID virus has brought up in sharp relief that you probably want to talk about. They need to be willing, of course, to respect your wishes. And maybe most important, they need to be willing to assert your wishes. And that's not just, saying what you want. It's also being willing to ask questions of doctors and healthcare providers to allow them to know whether the situation is one in which your wishes need to be asserted.
Myra, before we move on, Myra, let me ask you, one thing we encounter all the time is, most of us name one of our kids as the agent.
Right.
And it's natural. We want them to be involved. Is that always a good idea? Pros and cons? What about that?
Yeah, and that's a good point, Mike. You may have named your children just as a default. They may not be around. They may not be in the best situation to assert your wishes. They may not even necessarily want to talk about it with you. But if they are, they're obviously a good choice. And this is a great time to have the conversation with them. But it is something you need to evaluate.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that's so important is, as you all know, we're very big on multi-generational planning. And that just doesn't mean, name your kid. It means when you can, if you have a good relationship, that you're involving your family members, your kids and others in your planning and the decision making.
And it's important to talk to your whole family, not just the person that you appoint as agent, because you want that agent to be supported by your family, not at odds with them.
It's that old legal term that disharmony sucks. That's a legal term. Okay, let's now talk about the kinds of things that you can address in your Advance Directive. One of the most obvious questions that comes up, often the first question, is the end-of-life decision making. What do you want? Now, this is an individual question. Most people would say that if I'm ever in a condition where I am completely out of it, like a coma, final stages of dementia, where I just have no awareness whatsoever, and critically important, my physicians, my team concludes that it's hopeless, most folks say, let me go. Don't sustain me with tube feeding, with any other life-sustaining treatment. Some folks say, do keep me going. They believe for religious reasons, or distrust of the medical profession, or there may be a cure that comes along. So again, the point isn't, there's no right or wrong answer here. The right answer is what's right for you. We each make our individual decisions, and we can be as explicit. And as you know, when we draft documents along these lines, thanks to Myra, who really did the sophisticated drafting, we don't just say, I don't want treatment, if that's your view. We don't just say, I don't want treatment if that happens. We have details. We don't leave much to the imagination, and that's what's needed. Ambiguity is kind of the enemy when these issues come up. So we deal with them in great depth. What if there's a coma? What if it's dementia? All of these things, and sometimes waiting periods before implemented. It's a complicated topic that we try to address explicitly in your documents. You can talk about where you're going to receive care. You can leave to your agent, the person named in your document. The whole premise here, by the way, is you're not able to make your own decisions. You're so ill for whatever combination of reasons you can't do it. Okay, so where do you want to be cared for? Is it vitally important to you to stay at home? Many people say that. Easier said than done. It can be expensive to have caregivers at home. Hospice can be provided at home. There's no question about that. But it's hard. It's hard to make a blanket decision unless you have enormous financial resources because of the cost of getting care at home. But nevertheless, many decisions are made as we go along with any healthcare challenges that we encounter about where are we going to be. And it's good to, at minimum, give authority to the person named in your document to make that decision. And where you have a strong wish, a preference, if not a demand, it's a good idea to include that. Organ donations, there's a misunderstanding on some that if we get to be a little older, I'm there too. Is there anything left? Is there anything any good? If you believe in the concept of organ donations, age in some ways is a limit, but it's not a barrier. There are internal connective tissues. We can still be useful in the context of organ donations. And very important, this is not on that topic, it's not a time to be politically correct or please somebody. You have to make the decision that's right for you, whether it's yes or no or limits on it. Some people have said only if a family member needs an organ is it okay. Whatever. It's your set of decisions. Disposition of remains. What happens with your ashes if that's what's going to happen? So we could spend an hour and a half telling amazing stories about some of the very explicit language that some of you have incorporated into your documents about where your remains might be. So a couple, just so you get the flavor about how creative some people are. One of our dearest clients, who is just absolutely. Let's go back, Mark. Let's go back. Yeah, because we still have a little more on that. Her ashes are to be deposited at a particular corner. It happens to be Macy's in the Stanford Shopping Center. So someday her kids are going to have to sort of walk up there, distract everybody off to the side, and then kind of sprinkle the ashes. A sports enthusiast, his ashes are to be loaded into shotgun shells. His buddies are to take him to the duck pond that they love and shoot the shells into the air. So many examples. Last one I'll give you is an engineer who worked in the field of aviation, Ames, and his dream forever was to go into space. He's now too old. He's a little older than I. He's in his 70s. It's not practical that he could ever go up no matter what happens, no matter what Elon Musk comes up with for space travel. Some of his ashes are going to go into space. We set aside about a fair bit of money in his trust to make sure there's money to pay for his ashes to be loaded into a ship one day and to go off into space. So you can be very creative. Last point here, COVID-19 special challenges. You didn't draft your document. We did with COVID-19 or a pandemic or these crises in mind. Who would have thought? So we're going to be coming up with some new language for folks who might want to update their documents to address this. Some of the individual advocacy things that we'll be talking about later, they depend on you being present with your loved one who might be in the hospital. Obviously, that's different.
There is one thing I just wanted to talk about, where care is to be provided. A lot of people really want to die at home. But with the COVID virus going on, a lot of people in nursing homes in particular, in assisted living facilities, people who have underlying conditions, a lot of those people are expressing a wish not to be taken to the hospital. at all. Um, so that would require making arrangements to be taken care of at their place of home of residence. Um, the other thing is if someone has said, I really want to die at home, even if I'm sick enough to go to the hospital, I want to come back home, probably not a good idea in this case. Let's say someone does go to the hospital, is on a ventilator, and it's becoming clear that the lungs are damaged to the extent that they might not be able to survive. And the agent, maybe it's your son, who says, oh, mom wanted to die at home, let's get her home. No, not a good idea. This is dangerous in terms of transportation and logistically, and you probably won't be able to arrange comfort care there in time. So there, you know, the COVID virus, that's just one example of many challenges. Next slide.
So, Mark, why don't you talk about music, since Myra sings beautifully. So what about that?
Well, I am a believer that music is a wonderful presence in any situation, but some of our clients have specifically requested to have music playing. Some have made very specific requests. Mike's Advance Directive says absolutely no rap music. I mean, I don't think he would even characterize it as music.
You're darn right.
Clearly, one of our clients said she wanted the music of Marlene Dietrich played, but it's a wonderful idea. It gives your agent and your family something really nice to do for you. It gives them a sense of control where you know you don't have much control if your loved one is dying, but if you they wanted music, you can play the music, and it gives people who come into the room, hopefully in the near future we'll be able to do that again, something nice to listen to. And music reaches parts of the brain that we're not even really aware of. It can reach people in a really deep, meaningful way, even if they're seemingly unconscious.
Well said, well said.
So
the next point is actually very interesting about excluding relatives. So here's the point. California is one of 2 or 3 states to enact legislation, and it specifically says that when you sign your advance directive, that if you name certain individuals, you can say that they may disagree with you and they may want to go to court to challenge what your wishes are, that you might want to be let go. If you take advantage of this provision, those relatives are denied the opportunity to go to court. They're deprived of court jurisdiction. And Myra and I have been involved in 2 so-called right to die court cases, where the more recent one was the sister of the gentleman who was in an automobile accident. And the sister had no communication with this guy for over 20 years. I mean, 0 communication. But when he was about to die, he was in a coma and he was going to be allowed to die. She arrived in the hospital and went to court with a lawyer to save her brother. And a mess followed. And in fact, that was one of the cases that generated the interest on the part of the California legislature. This usually comes up with folks who have strong religious beliefs, where they might feel it's inappropriate for somebody to not take advantage of life-sustaining treatment. That's usually how it comes up. I've frankly been surprised at how many people had relatives they wanted to name and delete in this way. So, you know, it's one of the opportunities in California, not in most states. Prohibited treatments, interventions. Some of us have fears or worries that certain types of treatment or interventions are inappropriate. We don't want them. My most poignant example by far is a Stanford engineer, very well-known, extremely bright, and in his advance directive, consuming about 1.5 pages of single-space language, it basically says that under no circumstances shall any form of anesthesia be used, no matter what. And he knows what that means, but he has a phobia, he has a fear of going under of anesthesia that is deeper than anything you could imagine. Now, not for most of us, but it makes the point that if there's something that's important to you for any reason, you know, we can put that into the document. We don't just have, as you know this, we don't have a check the box document. You know, we get into real drafting, which is, you know, frankly, it's a great thing that we do here. So let's go on. A couple more examples, Myra.
Yeah, well, I'm a dog lover. If I'm ever sick, I would like to be able to see my pet. Some people have this provision. Also, think about who you want to take care of your pet if you're unable to. You might want to provide for that as well.
And actually, I've already talked about ashes and where they're going to be scattered. People just get creative, and you may have done that. If it's ashes, some people have creative ideas about where to be buried, by the way. Religion, in a way, we've referred to that already. Myra, what about, you've done some drafting on this.
Jehovah's Witnesses prohibit the use of blood products to be transfused. That's one clear example. Some people have said, talk to my rabbi. Others have said, talk to my psychic. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if that's religious, but it certainly is related, spiritual.
So everybody got that. That we had a client who went through all of the normal issues, and then it says at the bottom in very big letters in her document, but before life is terminated, if that seems appropriate, don't do it until you check with my psychic. She is named in the document, and a backup psychic is named. So, yeah. So that makes the point. Here we are. The only limit when we're drafting your document is your imagination. Just because it isn't mainstream doesn't mean we can't deal with it and incorporate some wishes into the document. So, have at it the next time you think about reviewing or updating your documents. Be creative. It might sound funny, but have fun with it. You can put in something that might be kind of cute, meaningful only to your family, whatever. Okay, now a generic topic, but one that, again, Myra has done so much thinking and writing about, is the idea of the patient advocate, being there to make sure that you're well cared for and safe if you're in the hospital. So Myra, please do.
Yeah, it kind of breaks my heart that the COVID virus is making it impossible in many cases for people to have someone with them. Because basically being a patient advocate usually means that you have to be with that person. Let's say we have still open hospital rooms where people can be there, or even in just any kind of clinic setting. But you want to have someone who can advocate for you, and usually, not always, but usually it could be the person named as your agent in your Advanced Healthcare Directive. If it's not, then the HIPAA, which is the Privacy Act, would require that the person that you want to act as your advocate have a waiver signed by you to allow them to do that. So typically what does a patient advocate do to help the patient in some cases thrive rather than just survive in a healthcare setting? They're there to take notes. They're there to be with you. They assert and defend for you. I mean, that's, they ask questions for you. If you're under a severe diagnosis, often your brain doesn't work, and having someone to help you really helps. Now with the COVID virus, obviously you have to be creative. Maybe a tele-appointment, that you have someone with you while you're talking with the doctor. Or, if you're in the hospital, make sure you have an iPad or something that keeps you connected to the outside world. So, I mean, it's really, in addition to having an advocate help you advocate for yourself, I think it's therapeutic to have somebody's presence. So any way that we can ameliorate the difficulty of not having that person, I'm really for. So if anybody has creative ideas, I would love to hear them.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
You have some creative ideas. Okay, Mike has some good ideas.
Some of you might have noticed that when we first learned about the pandemic, and when the first time, this goes back now, what seems like a year, but it's just a few weeks, when we heard that people in nursing homes were going to be locked down, no visitors. Well, that troubled us deeply. And our first email to our community in light of what's going on was not be safe, wash your hands, the usual things. We really talked about some of the issues, and we specifically talked about the danger of isolation and how important it is to have somebody watching, how vital it is for quality of care in a hospital, quality of care in a nursing home, in any facility. Somebody's got to be watching is the point. So a couple of points that we made there, and I'll repeat them now. One is this works in a nursing home a little bit tougher when they're in the hospital. But if you know who the team of medical providers might be in the hospital, order some meals for them. Have them personally delivered. And, it says, delivered by the family of Myrtle Jones. Thanks for taking care of her. And the point there is to make her a little less anonymous. So they'll, just their awareness of your parent or loved one will just go up a notch. It can't hurt. It might not help. It can't hurt. Sometimes you can learn the name of one of the caregivers, maybe a nurse. And you got to be careful about this, but I know that at least on one occasion, a person created a bit of a relationship with a nurse and they got some extra communication. So look, it's tough when we're dealing from a distance, but we do what we can. We do what we can. So now let's get into the what if. What if there is a diagnosis, or what if you feel you're exposed and the danger is higher? So Myra, would you go through the things that you really need to focus on, like right away?
Yeah, and again, I think this is a continuing theme. Confirm that your agent, the one that you want now, is available, or choose someone else. Now is a good time to evaluate that. Talk to that person. Will he or she be comfortable in these high stress situations? And yes, it is very, very important to discuss these wishes with your family. Now, it's always a good time, because when planning for these kinds of illnesses or end of life decisions, it's much better to keep the communications open well before. It's hard to talk about these issues now. Use your advance directive as an outline.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, it's the question that I think it can be tough. How do you talk about this topic? It's not a typical dinner conversation, but as Myra just said, your advance directive and the headings, the topics, it's almost like an agenda.
Yeah, and the fact that all of you have probably gone through this process of thinking about what you want and appointing an agent, you're really ahead of the game. So keep it up, because it doesn't end with signing a document.
And that's one of the reasons, you have your free annual hour with us, right? A great many of you take advantage of that. Some of you don't. So you don't have to have a full hour's worth of questions. By the way, when you come in for that free hour, we don't just wait to see what you're going to ask about. We look at your file, we look at the decisions you've made, we make a list of the things that we think you should be thinking about. So, it's relevant to this, because it is an opportunity to rethink or take a fresh perspective as you think about your advance directive and related documents. Okay, so let's go on and continue talking about being safe in the hospital. And again, Myra, by the way, she was also a chaplain for a while at the Stanford Hospital, among so many other things. So, Myra, would you start us off on this as well, please?
Yeah, again, this is sort of, the first step is having an advocate. But if you can't have an advocate, these are things that you or your family member need to watch out for. And by the way, just today, I heard that in the Bay Area, some hospitals are basically saying it's okay to do some elective surgeries again. So, being in a hospital under normal circumstances, these things are still really important. Hand washing to avoid hospital-based infections, especially. Avoiding duplicative testing. If you or someone who's helping you can kind of watch what's going on, a lot of times you'll notice somebody's coming in and you ask them, what are you doing? And you find out that the test that they're coming to do has already been done. So you can avoid that. Avoiding testing where there's no beneficial outcome. A group of residents at UC San Francisco actually noticed that blood draws were frequent and often unnecessary. And I actually wrote an article that was ouch, avoiding unnecessary blood draws. So not all hospitals have proactive residents to do this. So, it's important to ask, to keep asking. And, these are things that I hope will come back to normal, and in normal times we'll be back in the hospital with the ability to have visitors. And Mike, you were going to talk about some of these things as well.
Well, the most important one for me, the second thing I asked that I could talk about this. So this is a story that comes from Myra, who was in the hospital at one point, and one of the docs, many doctors wear ties when they're in the hospital, when they're doing their work. They feel it's professional, whatever. Infectious disease docs usually don't, because ties just carry germs. And I think this is a quote from Myra when a doctor came over to talk with her and had a tie on. And, rather than just be complacent and not say anything, Myra didn't. That'll shock you. So this is, I think, a quote from her. Is that really a tie you're wearing in a hospital? So that's being a self-advocate on her part, speaking.
Well, and another instance, a doctor came over to me, among many others, most of whom were wearing long sleeve shirts, and he had his shirt sleeves rolled up. He did not have a tie, and I complimented him on it. And he said, "Well, yeah, I'm an infectious diseases specialist." And I said, "Well, can't you train your colleagues?"
Yeah. Well, hopefully, we do believe as we think about some of the implications of what's going on, in the healthcare setting, things are going to change. Isn't that inevitable? Some of the issues that we're grappling with today there's going to be a different take on them. New issues are evolving. What does it mean to be medically prepared at home? What do you need to have at home? What do they need to have as a stockpile in the hospital? Are some hospitals and providers better than others? All these issues are going to be bubbling up, and we're going to be seeing them. And if we're advocates, we're going to have an opportunity to have some input as well. Okay. So now we're going to deal with the topic that is, I think it's a really tough one. It's the topic of ventilators. Okay. So with COVID-19, if we listen to the media, it's like it's all about ventilators. Who has 600? Who has 300? Who has so many patients? And if you just listen to that, they're like nirvana. They're like, they're going to fix it. And if you get a ventilator, you're in great shape. If you don't, you're toast. So as we lead in on the next one, the question that I asked Myra to talk about, because she's the one who's been reading about it and thinking about it, is it contrarian or is it rational to question the role of ventilators?
Well, it's definitely not contrarian. I mean, even in the days before COVID virus, being on a ventilator is not a panacea, as many people know. It's very invasive, risk of infection, risk of delirium because you have to be sedated. With the COVID virus, where lung damage is one of the hallmarks of a severe COVID, it's even less clear that being on a ventilator can truly save a life, or if a life is saved, save it so that the person's quality of life is what they consider to be worth living. Doctors are learning more and more as this virus kind of continues to go on. Among other things, when your sat rate, that's the oxygen saturation in your blood, when it reaches a certain level, I think 95% or above is normal. And if it goes pretty far down, that's when doctors say, "Oh, got to ventilate." Well, with COVID, a lot of people who have really low sat rates are still talking, they're still functioning, and they're doing fairly well. So doctors have decided they want to try other things to see if they can get enough oxygen to the person. Some of these involve just an oxygen mask, BiPAP, and another thing called proning. Some of you may have heard of that, where they actually have the patient move to be on their bellies, sometimes just moving to your side, and often the sat rate comes back up. So it's not a death sentence if your sat rate goes way down, and most doctors now I think are pretty aware of it, but just in case, not all. And as I've said, if you do have to go on a ventilator because nothing is helping, Um, you can survive, but a lot of people think, I'm not sure I really want that quality of life that I might have. You can have lasting, as it says, lasting cognitive damage, lasting lung damage. A lot of it depends on underlying physical conditions. So that might be something. We've had people say, I don't want ventilator care no matter what. Others have said, I don't want ventilator care if it can help someone more than me. And others have said, yeah, I want whatever it'll take to keep me alive. So it's really up to you to make your wishes known. Whether they can be honored is another story, but generally, if you don't want ventilator care, that is something doctors really are going to want to know, so they don't end up having to make those kinds of decisions.
So let's revisit we've already talked about this, so maybe we don't need to get into it again, Myra. The whole issue of where you want to die. If it's, if you have a strong opinion about that, some do, some don't. Anything you want to add about the DNR order?
Just the fact that in California, generally, if people are within a year probably of death, to put it kind of bluntly, the physician order for life-sustaining treatment, a PULSE, is the form that people will need to sign, and that has to be done with a healthcare provider, a doctor. I think now California law allows for a nurse practitioner to go over those wishes. So that's something that if someone is really, near the end of life and knows that they don't want resuscitation, or knows that they do, this document does allow you to express that. But normally when people say they want to do not resuscitate order, the PULSE is the place to indicate that. And it can indicate that you want comfort care, can indicate that you want a trial of treatment, but if it's not working, you don't want extraordinary care. So that's the only thing I think we haven't touched on already.
So, a lot of our comments, I hope you all noticed that we don't have a position on what's right or wrong about any of these issues. Our role, our job, is to make sure to do all we can do to make sure that your wishes, whatever they are respected. It's about individual rights, individual decision making. So just want to be really clear that we're not advocating one view, the other, do this, don't do that. We're advocating that you make the decision that's right for you, that you make sure to the greatest extent possible that your loved ones, your agent are on board with you. On this next topic, again, I think we've talked about it. Actually, go back for just a moment, please, about your agent respecting your wishes. And I guess we've already mentioned that what can be a challenge if it's your spouse sometimes, your side. You got to be objective when you name somebody in that role to make sure that they're really going to honor your wishes. And last thing about the hospital, probably 4 years ago, many of you might have noticed there was a three-part series of articles in the San Jose Mercury, and the title of the series was "The Cost of Dying." The cost of dying, and for a lot of us, for a lot of folks, cost matters. For a physician making decisions about where you're going to be and which intervention and which drugs and all of that, they're not thinking about the cost. I guess it's not their job and all of that, but it's relevant to many people. If you only have $100,000 and you have a child in need, do you want to spend $50,000, $60,000 on the last weeks or the last month of life? It's a difficult topic, but it's very real. So for a number of our clients, maybe one of you, there's a provision in your document saying that the cost of care, the cost is relevant. Find out. In that series of articles, by the way, the conclusion on the part of the writer, who's a staff member, who's a staff writer at the Mercury, she went through the 3 decisions she made on behalf of her father. Each one of them was an intervention to keep him going. And in retrospect, I think it's a fair statement, she concluded that she shouldn't have allowed any of them. They were inconsistent with her wishes. And then when she published the summary, she had the number of dollars, what the cost of each intervention was. So, and I thought that was a real community service. Again, we're not for it or against it. But for some folks, cost matters. And being at home, having 24-hour care is costly. All these things are tied up together. You know, financial security, what you want for your kids, healthcare decisions. They touch each other. They're not isolated, right? Okay, letter of guidance. Just a little bit about that. So, Mara, I'll just start a little bit. Maybe you can pick up on it as well. In many contexts, we recommend that you write a letter, perhaps to your trustee about some of your values. We do, as you know, a lot of work in the area of special needs. And if you have a child with autism, whatever the need may be, and we do a special needs trust, we always recommend this letter of guidance. And the idea there is, you know, what would you want the trustee of your special needs trust to know about your kid? Things that you can't really put into the trust. You know, what food does he love? What really gives him some joy? What really pisses him off? I mean, just anything that you know, because you know your kid better than anybody else. Here, the idea is conceptually similar. What would you want your caregivers, your healthcare providers, to know about you? And you can get into a few more details. So, Mara, anything else you want to add on that?
I was just thinking of, I think I read an article where the agent was talking about what she should do for her father, who seemed to be near death. But it was possible he could survive. And she thought, well, what has he said? And he had at one point said, if I could be able to watch my favorite TV show and have ice cream with my family, that would be enough for me. And that was actually, you know, more helpful than some kind of generic, well, if I can't take care of myself, then I wouldn't want to stay alive. Because a lot of times people say that at the outset, but then when they find themselves more debilitated, they realize that it's okay to accept help and they can adapt to a different form of life. So having those kinds of anecdotes are helpful, and this is probably a good place to put that.
You know, a physician friend once took your concept, and what he said was he felt that as long as a person had the capacity for joy, and it really goes to what you said, that then life is worth living, and, you know, in his view. And he was a strong guy, so his views had a big impact on his patients. He was pretty directive, as some physicians tend to be. Okay, so let's go on. And Myra, if you'd, by the way, you know, we're going to save a little time at the end for the questions that you've submitted. We have a few already here. So Myra, action steps. What should people do? Think about.
Right. And this is just a quick review of what you should do. First thing, review your advance directive. Yep, let's review it. What do we need to do? It's always a good time, and particularly when, you know, your health status changes, your life status changes. Maybe you've gotten married, maybe you've had a child, maybe you've had a grandchild, and you want to think about that. So the COVID virus is also, I think, a big triggering event to review your advance directive. Do you need to modify and update it? That sort of speaks for itself. Confirm again that the agent is available and willing. Yeah. If they're not available or willing, then you need to find another one. And I think it's a really good idea to give a copy of your advance directive to your primary care provider. And some people say to any institution in which you might be cared for. I'm not so sure that it's that easy to do, but you know, if you know that you're going to be taken care of, for example, at Stanford Hospital, it probably wouldn't hurt. And then, as Mike said, prepare a letter of guidance.
So we've talked about healthcare. We've talked about the advance directive. Let's end this presentation by talking about the integration of your advance directive with the rest of your planning. So the point here is, you know, when you do an update, when you're thinking about this, when you use your free hour and you're just sitting at home thinking about these issues, you know, you have other estate planning documents. Together, they make up the core, maybe the platform on which your estate plan sits. So the advance directive, critical. We've done for all of you revocable trust and durable powers of attorney. With many of you, we've talked about the structure of your trust. Should it be the A-B trust? Should it not be? This thing called portability, all of these issues we've talked with you about. And the second point, is anything stale and out of date? It's not uncommon for physicians, if they see an advance directive that's 25 years old, to say, well, how do I know this is still that person's wishes? Not a bad point. Sometimes banks hesitate to honor a durable power of attorney if it's 20 years old. So there's value in updating your document. I think it's objectively logical. Myra mentioned, can't have to continually say, make sure the people you've named as trustee, that they're willing and able. Your successor trustee is going to be the key to your life in so many ways if you can't manage your trust. Are they competent to be trustee for you? This last point about the agent knowing other key people, that point is important. Do they know care managers, other professionals in the community who could be part of a caregiving team for you? So our last point in closing, before a few questions and a nice closing here is, if you haven't used your free hour, your peace of mind hour per year, do it. Give it away to your kids. All of your kids need to have an advance directive and a durable power of attorney, and if not a trust, at least a will. But they have to have these documents. You know that. So if they don't, give them your hour. It won't cost anything to come to see us. We discount our fees when we do other documents for your kids. You need to do that. So, we're integrating long-term care planning, special needs planning, dynasty trust, tax planning. You all know that. But again, it's all part of the whole. So in closing, as we get to the questions, in closing, we just want to leave you with a very upbeat message, and we'll see that on the screen in just a moment, I'm sure. There we are. This is an opportunity to think about our families, to bring everybody together. It is an opportunity. We're sequestered, we're isolated, but people are having Zoom meetings all the time. So it's an opportunity and it's a stimulus to get us together and to become closer with our family members and our friends, living life your way, the way that you want to live. So we've got about 10 minutes available for questions now. And let's see, Mark, do you have any? I have a couple of them here. Maybe yes. I'll start.
Yeah, why don't you can start, and there's a couple that have come in and that I will go over.
Okay, so I'll ask Myra this question. So one question that came in is, what about naming more than one person as the agent for healthcare decision making, where they're co-agents, two people together? What do you think about that?
You can do that, but we don't usually recommend it because it's much easier for a healthcare provider to talk to one person. And, depending on the availability of both of them, having to find them together, there may be decisions that need to be made suddenly. I strongly recommend making sure you talk to both of the people and maybe, having an agreement about which one should be the primary agent.
So you'd recommend one person?
I would recommend one person, yeah.
And in those letters of guidance, you can say that, I've named you, but I really want you to talk to everybody else.
Yes.
You're going to decide, but I want you to talk with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can do that. So one last question, then we'll see what questions Mark has. What if you're in another state? What if you signed your advance directive, but you're traveling in Texas, which we do pretty often? Don't ask why, but we're in Texas a lot. What if, God forbid, something happens there? Will our California document be effective? And we think that in many ways it will. It's not the law of that state. It's not the document that the Texas legislature approved. But what the documents in virtually every state have in common are what we talked about earlier. They let you appoint somebody to be a decision maker, and it gives guidance.
Right, and we
want to know what you want.
We have the constitutional right to basically give informed consent. So anything, if we've indicated our wishes in any kind of writing, I think it would be honored.
Good. Mark, some other questions?
Yeah, so one question is kind of related to the last one, but on a different angle. What if the person I named lives 400 miles or more away? They're not near me, but it's the only person that I really trust in this role. Is that still okay?
Yeah. Well, my thought, first of all, is that, when you name an agent, the primary criterion is somebody who is dependable, and maybe this is two criteria, dependable and responsible. End of life decisions in particular, they don't come up on 10 minutes notice. If there's been some traumatic event of some sort, there's notice and there's time for that person to become involved. You're going to be stabilized first, then they see what the assessment is, then a judgment is maybe made about your prognosis.
Yeah.
And that's when the agent would be brought into the picture. And if you're 400 miles away with Zoom and Skype and all of these things that we have.
That's a hidden blessing of the COVID virus that we're all becoming accustomed to using remote.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say totally ignorant of these tools before, but I sure wasn't, I wasn't embracing them. And here I am, very comfortable, had a Zoom meeting with new clients this morning, and then another Zoom meeting with a POM member. So, it's opportunity. So it can certainly be done. You'd like to think that you'd like to have somebody nearby so they can physically be there. If they can't be, they can find. There are people who can be hired, social workers who can go in and observe. So, yeah, it's not ideal, but it can be done.
We have another question about POLST forms, Physician's Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment, also kind of the new version of a DNR, Do Not Resuscitate.
Mm-hmm.
How do those fit in with advance directives, and how can we be sure that a hospital will look at a POLST in an emergency situation?
Myra?
Well, the POLST form is sort of the ideal form or vehicle to get end-of-life wishes honored, because it only really comes into play at the end-of-life issues. So hospitals, if they don't have the form themselves, you can get one online, but it has to be filled out with a doctor or a nurse practitioner. So they would be aware. And hospitals are now, I think, pretty good about making sure that they honor these. These are what they're used to, what they're comfortable with.
And just to add, I mean, we have a stack of, for lack of a better term, testimonials from folks who had our document, didn't have the POLST form, and they basically said that the language about end of life, DNR in effect, was honored, that it worked. So, the two kind of reinforce each other.
Yeah, that's right. It's not instead of an advanced healthcare directive, it sort of jives with it. So it's meant to go along with it.
Yeah, another question along those lines is one question says, my primary care doctor said that my advanced directive doesn't matter really. It's more, what matters much more is my agent and making sure that my agent knows what I want. Is that true? Or can you comment on how the language in the advance directive relates to how important that is versus what your agent actually says to your doctor?
Wow.
Well,
I find the question to be a little kind of internally inconsistent, but Myra, do you want to comment first?
well, I mean, to the extent that, yes, it is really important who your agent is, and that they have the guidance of your advance directive, which is important. And yes, it is more important that they are in tune with your wishes. But if, for example, your agent isn't available, then you do have this document that can guide doctors. So it can reinforce your agent. And, what the doctor said is not wrong, I don't think. I think it is important. And the person that you appoint is truly important, because doctors may not have a lot of time to actually read your advance directive. But, in the absence of someone, the advance directive is still important, but the agent is the one who's going to carry out your wishes.
Yeah, and I think it's a primary responsibility of the agent not to decide for you, but to understand your wishes.
Exactly.
And to honor your wishes, regardless of their views. And that's part of that discussion that Myra talked about as being so important.
Right.
Let's see, going through different questions. We want to make sure that the questions are relevant to everybody here. That will be very useful to everyone here. One question was just about, okay, so we went over some new language that we might want in advanced directives. They were asking, is there a cheat sheet that they could look at before they come in to update their advanced directive, or how would they think about what additions they might make? For anybody here who's listening, they say, okay, this is great, I want to update my advanced directive. What types of issues or thinking should they bring into the meeting with them to make it efficient?
Yeah, so my response is your existing advance directive would be your guideline. You look it over. Does all of the language continue to reflect your language? Are you comfortable with it? And it's pretty, we do a pretty exhaustive job on your advance directives. We don't have, as you know, we don't have a simple form. So I really, as said before, in the family discussion context, the document is an agenda. It gives you a list of the topics to think about and to raise and to rethink as time moves along. Myra, anything you'd want to add?
Well, one thing that we do try to do with our clients is to explore their specific underlying conditions, if they have any, which can bring their own fears about, because they know more the course of their illness and what might be likely to happen, that they can actually specifically sometimes address in an advance directive. With the COVID-19, people are getting a sense of what could happen if they get a severe case. Now, I just want to keep in mind that 80% at least of people survive. But for those who do go on to get a more severe form, they may want to specifically think about whether they want ventilator care, whether they want dialysis if their kidneys are failing, whether they want, to even go to the hospital. So in that sense, I think that's very specific. If you have an underlying condition that you haven't addressed and that you're worried about, that also could be something you could add.
And I must say, in light of COVID, of what's going on, we've already been working on some new provisions, some presumptive language that might be incorporated into advanced directives going forward. Again, in light of what we're learning and experiencing these days. So it isn't like, desperately you have to come in and add that language to your document. We don't feel that way. But if you're going to be giving it a fresh look, or if you are concerned about these extraordinary developments that just came out of nowhere, probably would be a good topic, and you can see what we have in mind. Again, provisions that we might add to your updated document. And last point on that, we already mentioned staleness. If you don't have a change of mind, if you read your document and it's fine, you think, boy, this nails it. I'm really comfortable with this. We're still a little bit worried about staleness, and rather than signing a new document, rather than having to come in and see your lawyer, what we recommend you do, take out a good old-fashioned Post-it or a sheet of paper, and you just write, very simple. You say, let's say your document is 14 years old, and we're a little worried about staleness. You say, I just reviewed my advance directive. It still reflects my wishes, signed and dated. So you've just addressed the staleness issue, didn't cost you a penny, didn't have to go anywhere. It's a shortcut if you're perfectly comfortable with everything.
Great. Yeah, there's some other questions about very specific situations, but I think we kind of covered most of the other questions. One was about, is a post form or DNR needed in addition to an advance directive, or can it negate it? I think we answered that absolutely you would want both. Is that correct?
In the right circumstances, yeah. If you're in a condition where you may be expecting to die within a year, then you probably want to post if you want to express what you want. I mean, if someone is a do not resuscitate order should go in that document if that's what you want. But there are other ways to express your wishes within that.
And don't forget, if it's your view that you would want treatment terminated in dire circumstances, you've already said that. So
right.
I would say it's good to have the post form. It's not a necessity. The advance directive is a necessity because it doesn't just deal with end of life. It deals with all medical care decisions.
Yeah, the post just allows you to put your wishes in an advance directive in the form of medical orders that are sort of abbreviated because your advance directive has much more, but it's something that doctors are used to looking at under those circumstances.
Okay, well, listen, we're at the end. We had a full hour. We enjoyed this very much. It made us think through these topics and get really organized for you. We look forward to talking with you all. Again, if you haven't used your free hour, please do. If you don't use it, give it away. Why not? Your kids, your family members, your friends, they need to do all of these documents that you see on the screen. You know that. So we invite you. We cherish our peace of mind membership. there is a special relationship. Let's face it, there really is. And we're so pleased to do these webinars that are designed only for you. These are not community-wide. So we very much appreciate your taking some time out this afternoon to join us. I enjoyed it very much. I know, and Mark Gilfix, also an attorney in our office. You know, he's the voice in the background. He's been managing the slides. So Mark, thank you for taking care of that. It worked very smoothly. All right. And with that, we'll bid you good afternoon.
And
we
stay
hope to see
safe
you
and
soon.
healthy.
There you go. All right. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.